So kind of an interesting thing to start out. You and I both have kind of a creative life and a life in medicine. I'm also a musician. So you've been,
Oh,
it sounds like the photography maybe in some ways led your career just in terms of wanting to kind of learn more about the human condition, what's going on with people, and even Doctors Without Borders.
yeah, yeah. I kind of started, as a doctor, then got interested in photography, and then back to medicine again, actually.
Is that right?
So, yeah, yeah.
And what was it about the autonomic nervous system that sort of drew you in?
I just understood, I think, from the practice of seeing so many patients, that the autonomic nervous system would be something that made a lot of people, stumble in their lives,
Yeah,
made a lot of diseases. And when I heard that this could be tracked by something as simple as tracking their heart rate, it seemed like too good to be true, right?
yeah,
Is it even possible? But it turned out to be right. Very useful for me and for people. So in the first place, I was not even thinking about writing a book. So I was doing it for my own sake. I was finding out that this is so useful. I get more energy. I feel more refreshed. I find some things of the different energy thieves that I can cut out,
yeah,
and well, have more energy to do what I want.
yeah.
And writing the book just seemed to have helped so many people.
And anything in particular that you saw in treating people that you thought the autonomic nervous system might be in some ways negatively affecting them if they were in sympathetic response, kind of fight or flight or freeze?
It's, I would say, almost half the patients in a normal day's job at the office would be something related to stress.
Yeah, yeah,
Either lack of sleep or anxiety or depression or feeling exhausted and fatigued and brain fog. It's just so common, and
yeah,
particularly burnout. And so many people, they need to go to the doctors because we are the ones who can say to the company that they have a sick leave. So we have to make, to write that, to confirm that. And so I could see that this is costing so much pain, but also so much waste of working force, so that,
yeah.
and that has been useful for so many people that when they can regulate this using the wearables, they are able to get back to work again.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how much I shared with you in my career, but I started out in this career because I had chronic pain as a young person, and so back pain mostly. And so for me, starting to learn this, I was an English major, so I wasn't planning on doing this. I just decided to go to massage school to learn some things, and in that, I got interested in craniosacral therapy, and then through that, the autonomic nervous system, and what I started learning for myself, and then people that I've treated. I've treated almost 30,000 people at this point, so it's the same kinds of things I see over and over again, which is that the way that this ends up manifesting in the physical body, whether it is a muscular condition, a pain response, neural response, uh, over histamine, response that's causing allergies, and then just the chronic depletion that goes on. Because as we like to say in my field, that sympathetic nervous system response is the big spender. And you kind of mentioned this in your book a little bit about, there's this body budget. I think you
Mm.
called it, which is
Yeah.
so how much energy we can supply for whatever it is that we need, and that if our battery runs low, how do we recharge that?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Knowing what depletes your energy and what restores it. And if you don't have any measurements, it's of course so much harder. So once you can use the heart rate as a way to get insight into this body budget. It's just like having access to your bank account and knowing,
Yeah,
how much this thing costs, how much money am I making, and then you're able to balance it. And with no insight into this, that we haven't had until we have these wearables. And of course, you as a craniosacral therapist and so many other, they have known about this always. Right. And doctors, of course, as you probably know, have had no clue.
Right.
They're
learning more. Yeah, they're getting more interested, but
yeah. So, and what's good also about these measurements is that finally, the alternative or complementary therapeutics, they have something to show, because you can see this in the autonomic nervous system, and you can see it in the client and patients, and they can show it to their doctor. And there's some funny thing about us doctors. We only trust what we can measure,
right,
to some degree, right?
Which is fair. And, I mean, especially when you're having to, in the U.S., having to deal with whether insurance will pay you back for the visit or whatnot. There has to be something that you can sort of prove out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good thing about this is that when people have these devices, they have control themselves. So that instead, it's taking actually a lot of the power from the doctor and the healthcare system and puts it into people's hands. So they see the results and they know what to do about it. And so many therapists are sharing, they're tagging me on Instagram, showing what their clients can tell after a certain treatment, that they can see it in their autonomic nervous system, that it relaxes the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah. So tell me about how this is tracked as far as heart rate variability is concerned.
Yeah. So heart rate variability is a measurement of the state of your autonomic nervous system, among other things. It's also it can also be measured to see how your mitochondria are working. If you have a poor working mitochondria, a mitochondrial dysfunction, which is also kind of the base for almost all modern diseases, you will also have a lower heart rate variability. But basically, it's revealing the state of the autonomic nervous system, whether you are in the sympathetic fight, flight, and freeze state, or if you are in the restful recovery state, the parasympathetic state. And the good thing is that the heart rate will behave differently between these two states. So if you are really relaxed, then when you breathe in, the heart rate goes up a little bit because your lungs are filled with oxygen, and the body takes advantage of that and pushes a little bit faster. And then when you breathe out and there's less oxygen in the lungs, the heart rate slows down just a little bit, measured in milliseconds, but still detectable. And that reveals that you are in the parasympathetic restful mode, where recovery happens, where there's enough resources for your immune system to function properly and do its job. But then if you're in the stressful state, the fight, flight, and freeze sympathetic state, then the heart rate will beat at a very steady pace, no matter whether you are breathing in or out. And this is how the wearables can see where you are on this, of course, sliding scale, and to compare it to their millions of users and algorithms and artificial intelligence and whatnot, and will give you an estimate of whether your stress balance is compatible with health over time, whether it's a sustainable health balance.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we are under too much chronic stress, both from a busy lifestyle, but that is just part of it. Once you start tracking your heart rate, you see it's the food, it's the alcohol, it's a poor fitness level, it's many surprising sources to the stress in our lives.
Yeah. And I just got done doing a talk actually last week, and I'm organizing, I'm preparing to write a book about this exact subject, which is so interesting that you got led to me at this moment. And so when I was talking about it, what I'm trying to help people understand is, what to help them discover what might be triggers for them, so that they can also sort of understand. I wasn't talking about anything about wearables, but what does a sympathetic activity feel like in your body? And for people, I treat a lot of people. I do a lot of work in coordination with mental health too. And so somebody who's had sort of early childhood stressors, oftentimes their baseline of what feels like normal to them is actually pretty high sympathetic activity most of the time, right? And you've probably worked with a lot of these people.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, the chronic health challenges that they'll face as they age are much higher than people who haven't had, you know, that experience. But there are ways to sort of bring it back into balance. And what I'm really interested in with your work is, you know, if you can sort of track this over any sort of given day, and because people don't always, if I sort of explain to them, and they might even have an experience on my table where they're like, I've never felt this relaxed before in my life, but there may be still another level for them that they can actually get to. They just haven't even experienced it yet. This is just relaxed compared to what their norm is. So if they could start to track this over time, they could actually see that things are changing incrementally, even more so. And I think that might be something, and maybe even just sort of understand where in their day they may have triggers. That's another piece that I think could be very, very helpful for people.
Yeah, exactly. And this will be measurable before you really can feel it, at least, and to be sure about it. So you'll be able to see that in certain situations you are improving, even if it's not so obvious to you. Yeah. Because we are not really constructed as human beings to feel this. We have excellent senses from outward threats, you know, eyesight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch, and so on. Because throughout the millions of years, all the threats to our existence came from other animals and enemies and foul food or poisonous food and these kind of things. But now what is threatening our health and lives, it's the inner stress. It's too much pressure on our system with a too low capacity to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so we are not equipped to feel that. On the other hand, it's quite the opposite. These senses are muted. So we cannot feel that, because if you felt the inner stress, that would be in the way of the signals from the outside, and you would be the first to be eaten if you were sitting there feeling your own inner stress, you know, taking the attention away from something.
Your presence isn't there.
Yeah. So we can't really feel it. Many people say, oh, we have to listen to our body, but we are really poor at it. And particularly the ones that are having this ACE adverse childhood experience history, they would be the worst. Because they are used to having these really intense lives. So just as you say, it takes a lot more to get them down into the parasympathetic mode than they would expect. So, but once they manage to do that, the reward for them is even a lot higher.
Yeah.
And probably in their younger years, it would have been, the body is very forgiving, is very resilient. But once you get into your 40s and 50s and 60s, you have to take care of your body. And if you are going full speed with a lot of anxiety, poor sleep, having poor strategies to deal with the stress, you know, things that only further deteriorates the stress, as they often have, it just makes matters worse.
Yeah. So can you explain to me sort of how the device works and how that relates to any sort of treatment that then will, you know, follow that?
Yeah, there are many different kinds of devices. At the moment, I have the Garmin watch, I have the Oura Ring, I have the Whoop band. That is my different favorites. The Garmin watch, by far the best one. Really, it's a huge, a lot easier to use. It's also the cheapest one of the three. So when you are using these devices, you will get a heart rate variability overnight. That is what all of them would give you. They would give you a state of your recovery. How well have you been recovering throughout the night? How much physiological resources do you have to spend this particular day? And after a while, you will understand what affects the stress levels, what affects your sleep quality. But better than Oura and Whoop would be the Garmin, where you can see a 24/7. You will see a curve for every 24 hours. You will be able to see how well is your sleep. Are you in the parasympathetic mode? you would be able to see during the day how does meals affect your stress levels, how does a meeting from a certain time to the next hour, how will that affect your stress levels, and so on. So it's much easier to micromanage your stress levels with the Garmin. But all of them, and probably all of the smartwatches, will give you some valuable information that you can use. But for most people, the Garmin watch is by far the best one.
And so let's say as an MD or as someone, working with somebody who's giving you this data, what do you do with that information then?
Well, if I have patient, most of the time I work just as a normal doctor, and I do what is expected from me from the patients, which is they come with a disease and they expect me to fix it, find a pill or refer them to a specialist or a certain procedure and so on. But sometimes I can see that they have like a Garmin watch, I can see that they have some device. Then I would ask them, okay, can I have a look at your phone? Can I see what's going on in your life? And often from the graphs and the curves and the heart rate variability, we would be able to learn a lot about what's going on in their lives. And to see, okay, maybe they have been trying to work half time, for example. And you can see the effect that would have on their system, whether they can tolerate it and go into 100% job, for example, or not.
Yep.
So the good thing is that the heart rate responds to kind of any demand on it. So you would be able to see and kind of read out the intensity of their lives through these devices. And of course, or the apps of these devices would give them also an interpretation about what is going on in their lives, whether they have been, you will get a message, whether you have been recovering fully or whether you should take it a bit easier today, and so on.
Yeah, because that's always the interesting thing with what when we talk about stress, there are also good stressors for the body. So you talked about it in the book a little bit of, exercise stress, or as something like sauna or something where your body's being challenged in some way. That can actually be sort of a good stressor because it sort of challenges, thermal regulation and, heart rate variability and all these different things that it's almost kind of like, forcing your body to make decisions about what's working best for it. But those internal stresses that you're talking about are things that, especially when we're not moving, when we're not sort of challenging our breathing system in the proper way, where a lot of times, this is what, part of my work is that I notice that a lot of people's breathing systems start to almost shrink a little bit. So, a lot of my work, because I'm doing work around fascia and connective tissue, I'm looking for where there's restrictions around that breathing system, because I know that that's also informing that autonomic nervous system. So I'm just curious to hear, your take on some of that.
Yeah, so we need to stress, and if you are just relaxing, then we will just become weaker and weaker and weaker until everything becomes stressful of movement and different kinds of stress. So we need to stress, and we need to put strain on our bodies, both mentally and physically, to build ourselves stronger. It's kind of a signal to the organism that this person needs more power, so we need to power up the mitochondria and make more of them and make them more efficient. And for example, mitochondria are energetically expensive to have. So if this basic system senses that this person is not really needing this power, it is just relaxing, okay, then we don't have to have all these mitochondria, all this power available, because this person never uses it, right? Yeah. So we're just downsizing this person.
That's interesting.
And once you start stressing your body, and by the hormetic stress, just like you say, with heat differences in the sauna, or you're exercising in some fashion, then it will provide with more mitochondria, making it a more efficient physiology. And so the problem is not necessarily that we are stressing too much, but that we are recovering too little.
Right.
So that is, I think, is more common, that we are not having enough time in the recovery phase. And when they put these kind of wearables on hunter-gatherers that still exist today, we see that they are active for like 3 hours a day, and the rest of the day they are relaxing. And that is the intensity that we are constructed for
Right.
under ideal circumstances, and these people are outside under sun exposure, they're eating natural food, they are moving, they are together, they are sleeping at night, no artificial lights, and so on. So
they're going down
so
with the
they
sun. Yeah. Yeah.
right. So that they have ideal circumstances, and we have so many factors against us in the modern day lives. An indoor life, with a artificial lighting, we have a disturbed circadian rhythm, and all of these things,
Right.
and ultra processed food, and alcohol, all of these things that stresses us, that will make that our body, even if we are not doing anything, it's not fully relaxing. We are not in the parasympathetic mode,
Right.
even on the couch watching Netflix, right?
Right. Right. And that's one of those things that people feel like they need to do to wind down. But I'm finding as I'm getting older, I think we're pretty close in age, that I because of all the different demands of like having children and job, and I'm traveling a lot and doing all these things. When I actually get time down, I almost kind of lean more to just playing guitar or playing music or something, because I find the activity, the blue light, the flashing, all those things, I can just tell the effect on my nervous system, and I kind of lean away from it. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
the NBA playoffs have been sort of keeping me engaged, so I've had to stay up late watching basketball. But the season's almost over, thankfully. But it's another one of those
Yeah.
things. I can even
Yeah.
tell how much watching sports. If you're following a sports team, sometimes can also be very activating.
Yeah. Yeah, and particularly if you have a beer or two during the game,
Exactly.
because that's a huge surprise to so many people when they start tracking, that the effect of alcohol, of stress on the system, is so huge, much larger than they thought.
Yeah.
And according to Whoop, the band that I have on my right wrist, they are tracking their users, so they are putting in details of what they have been doing the day before. And alcohol is the worst stressor of all, and it can take 5 days until you're back at the same recovery rate as you were. And if you're like me then, who used to drink alcohol, a couple of glasses of wine every day, I would never know how it was to feel refreshed.
Right.
And those 2 glasses of wine was even what was recommended by doctors at the time, that this was a
Exactly.
healthy habit, right?
Yeah.
But the most important, and I've done all the mistakes in my book. Everything. I
Yeah.
weighed 40 pounds more than I do today. I did not exercise, did not care about sleep and nutrition and any of that, and used to even be smoking and drinking alcohol more or less every day.
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing I did was quitting alcohol, actually.
Was there a tipping point for you as far as when you realized that you needed to make a change?
Yeah, it was quite clear tipping point, because my father got cancer at the age of 73,
Yeah.
and I just understood that, okay, I don't want that.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
too young.
realized, I realized that, okay, there's so much more knowledge now about how to live a long life and how to stay healthy and create health,
Yeah.
which is something we did not learn in medical school.
Yeah.
So I just started educating myself in my spare time and finding out, okay, how can I get healthier? And the good thing is that the same strategies that gives you extra years to live is also what gives you more well-being in the moment, and a better health
Right.
as you live, right?
Right. And
But
that's
we didn't
I
learn in medical school, we didn't really learn
no.
that your lifestyle had any effect other than smoking on longevity and health. It was not on a curriculum.
And it's the key to understanding what the autonomic nervous system is. I talk about it a lot on my show, so hopefully my audience is like primed for this. but it's one of those things that I certainly had no idea about. I mean, when I was a young person, I was involved in sports a lot for a long time, and then kind of switched into music. But my lifestyle didn't change. I just basically push all the time, and I think that was a big part of what led to back problems for me. But it was also, there were some unhealthy, dietary habits, drinking, all that kind of stuff too. So, and I think you kind of laid out a few things in the book that I'd be interested if you could kind of go through, just kind of talking about the kinds of things that you can make little adjustments to that are a big part of these kind of stages, so that you can help support that system if you notice that it's depleted.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think the most important is to do something on different fields, like do something to improve your sleep, something to improve your nutrition, something to improve your stress management, something to improve movement. So on different fields at the same time. So for example, on sleep, it would be the most important thing. That is why I start my book with how to improve your sleep, because once you have a better sleep, you have more energy to do the other things that you may need more willpower to do. And what is better for sleep is to have a cool bedroom, maybe 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. You would need to dim down the lights maybe an hour or two before you go to bed,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that you have the melatonin, sleep hormone in your system. You would need to not be eating after 3 hours before you go to bed. That is what most people who track their heart rate variability find beneficial. And of course, not use alcohol, and to try to sleep 7 to 8 hours of effective sleep. Not just hours in bed, but what you can see on your wearables is the actual sleep that you're getting. Yeah. And then you need to have, most of the wearables, they will give you an estimate of your VO2 max, which is your fitness level, how well your body metabolizes oxygen. And if you are at the lower end of that, maybe you have even down to the 30s, in like 32, 33 in VO2 max, then you have a really poor fitness level and need to concentrate on building more fitness through endurance training, preferably, but also strength training can help on your heart rate variability.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you need some stress management. If you see that is a problem, say if you have an ACE, you have an adverse childhood experience, for example, and have an autonomic nervous system that doesn't really allow you to go down into the parasympathetic mode, then you really have to concentrate on things like breath work, meditation, just calming down your system. And the breath work, to try to breathe maybe 6 breaths a minute, that's probably the most effective way to calm yourself down.
Mm-hmm.
Just close your eyes, breathe slowly. And of course, when you can see it on the watch, then it becomes a lot easier. And many of the devices would also have built in, I don't know what you call it, just like Headspace and so on. They would have it in their systems. On Aura and Whoop, you would be able to take a moment, and you would be able to see how your heart rate variability reacts to those 3 or 4 or 5 minutes that you do this relaxing exercise. So that, I think, would be the most important thing to start. And you would also be able to do cold water or cold plunges. It's also an effective way to calm down your system, actually.
Yeah. And one of the things I like to remind people, because I've worked between fitness and manual therapy for a long time, and I feel like a lot of my work is about trying to really balance this autonomic nervous system. So the other thing to consider when it comes to movement is that sometimes we have to kind of think about if we are at a place where we haven't, our VO2 max isn't very good, our fitness level is not very good, maybe having a guide through this process is helpful, but also just, taking it really incrementally and building up, because, pushing too hard, if you're 50 and you're going to go try to do the workout that you used to do when you were 25, you're also going to stress your system, and that's going to cause another recovery period. So, that's part of it. And the other thing is, if you've been in sympathetic, mode for a while, let's say lost a job, lost a parent, something like that, and you've been through a stressful time period, doing those hard workouts is actually going to be, is going to put you into sympathetic as well. So sometimes you want to shift over into what I would call like more parasympathetic type activities, like yoga, tai chi, swimming, walks outside, something like that, that actually just sort of calms your system, but also allows for some kind of movement and, getting all these systems back online too. And anytime you're doing any gentle movement like that, you're oftentimes engaging your breathing system, and that's going to calm that response too.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. So both that if you have a poor fitness level, then almost any intense activity will lead to a lot of lactic acid. You will have inflammation in your system. You will feel a bit sick, and you will be demotivated. So you give up.
Exactly.
So, and that is why it's so important to use, and this is particularly for the Garmin watches, where you will see after the exercise how your heart rate responds afterwards. So many people use the trackers to see their heart rate as they are exercising, but it's much more important, in my opinion, to see how your heart rate responds to it afterwards. And I think if you have a poor fitness level, then you would be surprised for how long recovery time you would need, even after what you would think is an easy exercise session.
Yeah.
And also, as you say, that you have to take into consideration the totality of your stress situation. So if you have had some stressful times, you have a stressful job, busy family life, it may not be beneficial health-wise to push yourself hard in the exercise.
Yeah, I'm curious with the on the recovery side with heart rate stuff. Does that give you any good information as a doctor about where there may be some something going on with the heart?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So actually, it doesn't really have so much connection to how your heart rhythm or the condition of your heart is doing.
Okay.
But a lot of people many of the watches would now have an AFib detection. So you will be able to see if you have an atrial fibrillation. And in the age, for example, of 60, 70, that may affect 10 to 15% of the population. So it's quite common.
Yeah.
And it's a serious condition. So that needs treatment. So that's a very useful thing about these watches, that they can detect this AFib.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. What have you been doing as far as using the information? Just personally, I'm just curious what you use this information for.
Yeah, personally, I use it all the time because the Pulse Cure has been just an incredible bestseller in Norway for 2.5 years, and it's just been like being in a roller coaster for that period. I'm just a normal doctor, before this happened.
Yeah.
And now I'm in the media several times a week. In some way, there's interviews, there's people contacting me from Instagram. And I'm writing a new book, and so there's always something going on. So I really have to take care of my stress balance. Yeah. So it's like I'm a race car driver. You have to have really good brakes on your car, and you have to break down when you can and slow down. So I'm using it actually all the time, making sure that I get enough sleep. Over time, I could have 2 or 3 busy days and push myself, but I know that after that I need to recover. So I have to plan my days and weeks carefully, so that I keep the stress balance. I don't get into a burnout situation or get too tired.
But the wearable can also kind of tell you when you are more or less recovered. Do you feel like you get good information from that, right?
Absolutely. I can see whether I'm in a balanced heart rate variability. So
Yeah.
they would be pretty good at detecting that. So, and I'm really sure that you would never get into a burnout situation without these wearables warning you long before that you are pushing yourself too hard. You have a
Yeah.
low heart rate variability. This is not, not good.
Yeah.
So, like the Aura Ring would just refuse to take measurements. It would just say, okay, we put you in a rest mode and we are not longer tracking your heart rate. You
Right.
just need to relax.
Right.
So or it will not detect the activity level. It will not care about your activity.
Yeah. The one thing I thought reading your book was that these are such I mean, on the grand scale, as far as healthcare is concerned, these are pretty inexpensive things to own. If you couldn't
Yeah.
own them, then I feel like, especially if your country has socialized medicine, it could really save, a healthcare system a lot by just having this information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the cheapest Garmin watch would be like $250, which
Yeah.
is good enough. And you could buy it secondhand probably as
Yeah.
well. So the entry level is not expensive, and all of the advice in the Pulse Cure is more or less all of them are free. So having and creating health costs no money. It could even be cheaper, right?
Yeah.
To put down the temperature, to drink water instead of anything else, and to do fasting, for example. Sleeping is free, breathwork is free.
Right.
What gets expensive, that is getting sick. And the problem is that there's too much money in sick people, in treating sick people. So the whole healthcare system is geared towards waiting until you get sick and then do something.
Yeah.
That is also where I get my money, from treating sick people. That of course I make some money from the books and so on, but by far most of my money is still coming from
Right.
treating sick people.
Yeah.
And so there's no incentive to keep people healthy, and it's not easy to monetize on it. So that's why it gets forgotten that actually the things you have to do to be healthy, be out in the sunlight, move, walk, run.
Yeah. I know.
It's all free. And of course, you in the US, it gets expensive for yourself if you get sick. In Norway, after you have been paying $300, the rest of the healthcare is free.
Yeah.
But in the US, I know that they can take your whole retirement, money
Right.
away from you, easily once
Not,
you get
not,
a
not only
couple of
that, but
diagnoses.
yeah, but not only that, but and you talked about this in the book a little bit, but if you're treating somebody after they're already ill, that's not really restoring health, So what people end up coming to see me for is more of the restorative work, because they need to get themselves back on some sort of track. But giving them a medicine or a surgery isn't necessarily going to get them back to that. That might be part of what's needed, but that's not the overall big picture of health. And I feel
Yeah,
like
and the
what you and
roots.
I are trying to, what we would like to do as medical practitioners is we want to feel successful by getting our patients to feel well, and otherwise our jobs feel sort of meaningless, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's and part of the problem is it's easy to track how many people you are treating, and giving medicines. But it's a lot harder to measure how many people are you making fit so that they stay healthy.
Yeah,
That's really hard to measure. So, and even though we as doctors are treating one disease with some medications, or dampening the symptoms, we are not going to the root cause. So the
yeah,
same inflammation and mitochondrial dysfunction and stressed autonomic nervous system will just keep another disease popping up, the year after that in some other organ, right?
right, right.
So we're not really going for the root cause, unfortunately.
And the reality is, I mean, about 30% of my clientele are actually people in medicine. So it goes to show how they are also looking for support and help because of their stress systems and all the physical things that are starting to manifest from that. And so, my network of people, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I do a lot of coordinating work between a lot of different fields of care. But in terms of the recovery work, most of my support people are, mental, emotional health people, nutritionists, naturopaths, and that kind of acupuncturists, that kind of people, because it's usually when someone's gotten depleted to a certain point, the healthcare system is not really going to get them, back up out of that hole. You really got to start, rebuilding again.
Absolutely, and many of these conditions will not have any biomarker, so
right.
They would have brain fog, they have burnout, they are almost bedridden, but none of the results that we as doctors have available will detect that.
Right.
But the heart rate variability does do that.
Yeah.
So even for many people who will be in these stress situations, they are often disbelieved by doctors because they don't have these lab results that show that they are sick. But when they show them the heart rate variability and the stress levels, then it's easier to, at least for the doctors who have some insight into this, to see that they are stressed and they have an autonomic system that is out of control.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. This is very enlightening, and I feel like this is another layer of ways to start kind of thinking about how we can monitor our health a little bit better and be more proactive. I mean, that's kind of what I'm always trying to do with people, is trying to figure out ways in which I can empower them to do these kinds of things. And because even my kind of care can get very costly, I feel like I'm trying to. This is part of me doing the podcast in the first place, and even like you, I want to write this book because I think a lot of the advice that I can give is basically just free. I mean, the things that people can do on their own is great if you really understand what those kinds of things are that are affecting you adversely.
Yeah, and the good thing is that, as I may have mentioned, that the patients have control. They get the tool, they get the dashboard to their physiology literally into their own hands. You're taking the power from the healthcare system and the physicians and puts it into your own hands real time. So it's not only a result that you would get every half year and that the doctor understands. It's something that you have available at all times and you understand it. So it's quite a huge difference. And now with the technology, with blood sugar, continuous glucose monitors, and so on, I think it's quite a big revolution going on that will change a lot from the strategy of waiting until you get sick and then do something to do something decades before. Because when a disease arises, like diabetes or heart disease or cancer, it has usually been a process that has been going on, or dementia or Parkinson or whatever. It's usually been a process that has been going on for decades before. That if you had this lifestyle that I depict in the Pulse Cure, it would dramatically decrease your chances of getting into those kind of diseases.
Yeah. And as a recent guest of mine said, people might be living longer, but there are also a lot of people are dying longer, which is, that's really, for me, that's the scariest scenario, is that you end up with, getting hit with some problem with diabetes or heart disease or something. And that means that starts to control and take over a big portion of your life.
Yeah. Your life quality is lower for like 20, 30 years. And you have to you probably would have had then 5, 6 diagnoses, needing to go to their different specialists. It becomes like a half-time job, just managing your diseases. Yeah. And then you get treatments with side effects, and suddenly you find yourself with 8 or 10 different medications. And the chaos of those side effects, don't tell me we have control of that. I don't believe that. So it's a lot to be saved, both economically but also in the human way to be able to live. But it takes effort. You're not getting away from effort. Yeah. You either do kind of a controlled, calculated effort to avoid getting sick, or you can hope for the best. But then when you get sick, there's an even more effort involved, and then it's out of your control. It depends whether the disease you contract is even treatable, and
Yeah.
whether you have a good doctor who knows what to do, or whether the medications will work. So
Yeah.
it's a lot better to do the effort beforehand.
Yeah, and hopefully my book will kind of get this organized for people, because that's kind of what I'm thinking about is, what I try to do in my daily practice with people is kind of help them to understand how to regulate and how to program that into their life so that it doesn't feel like effort all the time. It's energy, used, but you do get it's basically sort of like what you invest to get more back. And that's kind of the way I like to explain it to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we should figure out some way to, if you come to the States, we'll we'll share some of this together. I've been getting asked to do some talks and retreats and stuff, so maybe we'll figure out a way to do something together.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be cool.
Happy
so you're
to,
in Minneapolis, so that's a Norwegian hotspot.
That's right. That's right. All right, Torkil, thanks so much. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. And if people want to get the Pulse Cure, it's available anywhere, and it's also on Amazon and so on. It's also an audiobook. I know many podcast listeners would rather prefer to listen to the book rather than read it. So yeah.
And I'll throw both of those on show notes so people can just click those links and go right to it.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having me.